So I'm delighted to welcome back legendary Yes guitarist, Asia guitarist, many other things as well, Steve Howe. Hello, Steve.
Hello there, Kevin. How you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, two topics to talk about today. Asia, the reunion albums, and a little bit about Homebrew 7, but I know that that's not out for some time yet. So today, a 5-disc box set of the reunion albums 2007 to 2012. And as the title implies, it's got 3 studio albums on there and a live double album. So there was a time in the very early 1980s, wasn't there, when Asia was one of the biggest bands in the world. So what do you think it was about those musicians, including you, of course, those songs, those shows, which led to its success at that time?
I mean, the preparation we did, forming the band and, sharing the music and basically getting it ready for a producer who came along called Mike Stone, and he had a lot of handle on Journey and other big bands. So in a way, we had a lot going for us because, that concept of the supergroup was something or nothing much to write home about. It didn't guarantee anything, but it created some attention. But it was mainly the fact that 4 professionals were getting together and making something new. And I think that part of it was that there was an element of surprise, I guess, that it was as upmarket and sort of well prepared. So it was a good record. Having said it, it was well produced and it was well sequenced, and Gethin did a great job for us on that. So basically, it was like shoveling a lot of things forward and saying, well, okay, what about this? And everybody bought into it, and it was lovely.
Well, it certainly is a great record, that one, and a classic of its kind. And at the time, of course, you weren't in the Yes fold. Looking back now, how do you think about your times in Asia compared with Yes? Was it just a different aspect to your playing, or do you think it was less or more important to you than Yes?
Well, it was different. That was the main reason why I wanted to do it. I didn't want a band that, having been part of the glue that was through 10 years of Yes, had changed members and different people come in and different, issues and problems and different successes within that, like Total Gallic Oceans or Close to the Edge or, all the stuff. So basically, the time that I spent in the 80s was purposefully away from Yes, I felt that I'd done 10 years. I didn't actually imagine going back, because rejoining bands wasn't something that I'd really come across that very much. So basically, there was that whole period when Yes did 9125 and Big Generator. And basically, I was finding other ways to be employed and also broadening my musical sort of horizon. So I wasn't only, the Yes guitarist sort of thing from the 70s, but I was, forging ahead and doing solos and then GTR with Steve Hackett. And then, of course, John came back to me and we did ABWH. So, in a way, there was Yes in the 80s, but it wasn't called Yes. It was called ABWH until the Union thing, which is really another kettle of fish altogether. So I've got no regrets. I mean, the only regret is, I suppose, is that none of those 3 bands I've mentioned just now really had sustainability. And that was disappointing because after, even with GTR, that took like a year to get ready, write the album, record it, and then put it out and go out on tour. And it was, when the Hot Wheels of Mine kind of caught on quite well, and we seem to be doing well. But I guess, as they say, some of the best laid plans, actually, so the 80s was a time of in a way, success and failure at the same time. But I think it helped me a lot to, establish my writing, and out of it came Turbulence eventually, my 3rd solo album with Bill, and that kind of meant a lot to me, I guess. That was a period when I was feeling that I could change my course, and it wasn't going to be detrimental.
Yeah, so fascinating then. So there must have been differences then playing live with Asia to live with Yes. What were some of those differences?
Well, we weren't trying to, Yes, so we didn't compare ourselves really. No. We just thought that we had some material and we were going to go out and play it and sort of let Yes get on with it, and when I heard 90125, I realised that, the band had changed quite a lot, as much as I'd changed, doing Asia and GTR. So basically, it was a development. But on stage, it was real different. I still did a solo spot. I still played some classical or folk guitar.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was a very different creature, and it had a very different atmosphere, and that's what one would expect when you invent a new band, really. And I think our strength was that we didn't need to rely on our past careers quite as much as maybe we thought we did, if it had some longevity.
Okay, well, you spent some time away from Asia after some very successful first albums. What was it like going back? And that's what this set celebrates, when you went back in 2007. What was it like going back to the original lineup?
Well, I dabbled with Jeff a bit, in the interim, which was a different sort of Asia, and it was a bit of a club-based sort of Asia. So I wasn't, once I'd done that, I wasn't really interested in doing that again. So I got on with things, and Yes got going, and then Yes took a hiatus from 2005, 6, and 7. So there I was, halfway through that 3-year gap. I was I was okay. I was, interested in. I was free to do different sorts of things and dabble and record solo things. But basically, when the idea was presented that Jeff said to me, John's in good shape, and maybe there's a time. What do you think? And I said, well, actually, this time might work quite well. So after the meeting and the proposal and the excitement from places like Japan and America to see the original guys back together was very, very encouraging. So we didn't feel like at first we had to make an album. All we had to do was kind of like get back together and play the first album mainly, and kind of see how that feels. And we expanded that into sort of Korea tour, where we played various tunes from our career, which is featured on the DVD. So it was really after that period when we realised that, it's one thing getting back together, another thing doing career music, which most bands didn't really do. I mean, Yes weren't likely to do that very often. But basically, then the idea of the album, the new album, came along, and looking back, as I have done and checked it out before this re-release, those 3 albums, are very Asia.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it, it's Asia. And that kind of is okay. It's okay to do that under that umbrella.
Yes.
But for me, the first album carries just a hint of the first album in the sense of the sort of progressiveness of it. There's just some fairly kind of convoluted and mixed up arrangements in there, and we do some things that you might not think we would do. But basically, we drew on the material that was around and collaborated, and it was a very healthy time, on that first album. So for me, Phoenix does start that ball rolling quite well, and I was quite pleased when I look back at it, the different people who mixed it and the different kinds of work we did on it, created quite a continuity that I didn't think it had. So, in fact, before Mike Paxman joined us to do Omega and Triple X, at that time I thought, oh God, I think we do need overseeing, we need a producer. But in fact, the results of Phoenix were not at all inconsistent, and that gave me some pleasure.
Yeah. So, is your favourite Asia music from the first or from the reunion period?
Well, I'm not big on the favourite question because, that changes. You might feel one thing one day and another. I guess the first album will always be really my favourite because it says much more about the creative level that you do with a new band, and you give it all you've got, and we all had some material that we could kind of draw from, and the collaboration that John and I started, on the songs like Here Comes That Feeling, Cutting It Fine, allowed a lot of interaction, that we were quite good at that time. It's a shame that the second album didn't have that interaction, but that's because we got kind of rushed off our feet and kind of told to come up with another album, another hit single. It was almost like, well, hang on, that's not really our style. Yeah. But we fell into it, a dangerous trap. And I can think of one or two other albums that were kind of pushed along a bit too rapidly, and then they couldn't come to their full fruition. So, you know, if you look at some of the B-sides or some of the other things that were around, they should have been part of the album, really, because they showed the different versatilities and the different writing styles of the band. So yeah, the first album, it's hard to top that, even though Phoenix, as I say, does reference it in a way. So yeah, the first album's really pretty impressive for me.
Yeah. So I mean, Asia the band continues today. Obviously, you've retired from it, and there was the terrible loss of John Wetton. But tell us a bit about John Wetton. How did you get on with him musically and personally?
Well, I mean, you know, in the 1981 period when we met in a rehearsal room to try out to see if we were compatible, you know, with each other kind of thing. And that was absolutely terrific because John was like a secret weapon, and he didn't show his weaponry enough to have what a technical bass player he was, you know.
Yeah. Right.
So that was what it felt like at that point. And then I guess when we went on tour and, you know, the kerfuffle with the second album, you know, it kind of spoilt the biscuit a bit. You know, it wasn't such a happy bunch of guys. And, you know, there were too many champagne breakfasts and things. We were all getting a bit kind of older. So John and I lost a lot of touch, even though after we did the Asia and Asia concert in Japan with Greg Lake, which was kind of like an oddball thing to do, but it kind of kept a flame going a little bit for us. But then when John came back after that, I think we realised we weren't really going to go on with John. I thought things were really good, and then John said, no, they're not, you know. And I said, well, I don't get it, because we just had 2 weeks together. And so, you know, he was a bit like confronted by me. He found me a bit confrontational, which I didn't want him to do. So then, you know, then you've got a very long period when I didn't see John, we didn't talk much, and there wasn't much communication until 2006. So when that kicked in, I mean, there was a wholehearted effort to collaborate and team up and rehearse, and, you know, we thrashed away in a small room and almost deafened each other, because Carl was a very loud drummer, remember. So basically we rekindled the affectionate side of John and I's relationship. In fact, over that period, John and I got very close, and we were the two kind of loners sometimes, who were kind of like wandering around like the hotel gardens or something. John, oh, hello. And John was very intellectual. We could talk about anything. You know, he had his interests, he had his sort of particular things he was interested in. And basically, you know, it was really nice, you know, and I'm glad to say that those passing years, and even when I left in 2012, he kind of understood. Because originally when Yes got back together in 2008, he said to me, well, I guess you might be off a bit now, and you won't be treating Asia as your main thing. And I said, well, yeah, that's kind of true. You know, yes, he's getting it all back together again. That time with Benoit David and Oliver Wakeman. But basically, you know, Chris Allen and I were determined, and I think John saw that. So he could accept that Yes was a pretty big card in my life, and I was going to do that. But, you know, we didn't stop. And, you know, I was, you know, delighted to be in such demand that I was in demand from 2 bands, and also 3, really. The Steve Howe Trio had kind of got going. Well, that was the comeuppance, really, for me, was by about 2012, with Yes running and with Asia. You know, I was in a spin, and I hadn't concentrated on solo work, and I hadn't done much trio. So I kind of was just honest, and I said, well, look, at this point, you know, I just don't think I can juggle 2 bands. And I'd rather have these other things going on, which are much more controllable. So it was like Yes, and then it was solo and Steve Howe Trio. It was easy to manage those ingredients, but much harder with Asia. So John and I parted on such good terms. He was such a sweetheart, really. You know, he wrestled, obviously, as one would expect after, you know, having the problems he did. They don't just go away. They haunted him a little bit. I tried to help, you know, not that I could much, but you know, he told me things, we spoke about things, and, you know, he had a good sense of humour, and that's what kept him going.
Brilliant. Okay, well, it's great to see this box set out today as we record this. But we've just got a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to ask you a few things about Homebrew 7. Yeah. Now, for those people who are unaware, and this comes out in July, I think, Can you explain the difference between your homebrew series and your collections like Anthology and Anthology 2?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Anthology was both of the sets were both more or less completely the release versions of the music that I could accumulate, go through the bands I was in, 10 bands or something on the second one. And then the first album was really, a selection from my, I think it was 10 at that time, or 12, solo albums. So basically, they're official, they're things that people know, but they're grouped together to tell a sort of story in time, really time-based. They went through the time periods that existed. That's why the Anthology 2 jumps between Yes and Asia, and then back to Asia, and then back to Yes, because that was the timeline. But Homebrew's been a whole different story. When I did the first one in 1996, I just basically thought I'd do a one-off album of different tapes I had, things that I liked. I thought some of them were actually quite good. They've been developed by ABWH, a whole batch of them, and some of them have been on my solo albums in a different form, different arrangement, different sound, different lengths of tunes. So the Homebrew's always had this kind of quirky backstory on music that I've released. But the difference with 7 is I thought, make a change, break it up. I found I had a great deal of material that I wasn't really that fussed about anymore. Some of it was very dear to my heart, and some of it I kind of kept because I thought, no, don't go near this. This is one of my tunes, So I was a bit possessive on some of it. Yeah. And then I suddenly threw it wide open. And I thought, well, all this music, I'm not going to present it to another band. I'm not going to put it on the next solo album. So why not make a story from 1978 through to 2016, or just picking up on music that was a little bit buried, and a bit on the back burner. And some of it I was aware of, some of the things had never left me, like Outstanding Deal and A Lady She Is. They were always very dear to my heart. And other stuff kind of, I'd forgotten about that. You mean I did that like this, So I chose the kind of presentable versions of these tunes that I could enjoy, and that's really what Homebrew 7 is. So it's unheard, and there's maybe one or two slight exceptions that are a little bit like Homebrew, but in the most part it's fairly consistent that this music has just come out, even though some of it was recorded on a Revox in the late 70s, or other bits when I first got 8-track in the early 80s. So it's a bit like that story. It's a backstory on my music that explains, it expresses the fact that I do write a lot of stuff, and you didn't hear all of it. So it's the stuff you didn't hear.
Yes, that's fantastic, and it'll make a wonderful collection of all those Homebrew records.
I'm delighted that I've been consistently including my photographs, which give it a sort of personal touch, some quirky photos. Sometimes, they're just there might be more naturistic sometimes, or sometimes they're just quirky, somebody walking across a road with a sign over them saying, get sconed or something, but anything, so it was really that random photography. It was almost as random as the qualities and the time periods in the music itself. Some of those pictures were fairly old too, or they were some of them quite new. So, Homebrew just somehow fell into a pattern. I really wasn't expecting it on the first one, but it's been kind of delightful, and it's been another way for me to express at another level the way I work.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, well, we're running out of time, but just a last quick question for you. Sure. Any idea when we might be hearing about a new Yes record?
Well, I can't actually say, but you will soon. I mean, I will say that fairly soon we'll let people know what our plans are in that regard. Okay. But other than that, I can't say anything.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you, Steve. Wonderful to speak to you once again, and thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Okay, pleasure. All right, and bye to all the fans too.